You got to rack up those wins. Remember, nobody could take those from you. And just accept the fact that there's going to come a day when you're not as sharp, you're not as good, not as fast, and you're going to lose one. And that's just the way it rolls. Like, that's the price you pay from all the good you did prior to that.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guest today is known for building unbreakable humans. As an extreme athlete, his accomplishments include finishing 50 ultramarathons and 14 Ironmans within the span of 1 year. He's also a successful entrepreneur who started his career working for a mob boss in Queens, where he built a multi-million-dollar pool business. After a career on Wall Street, he fled to Vermont to pursue his passion and created the Spartan brand. Now, with a community of over 10 million athletes across the globe participating in his portfolio of brands that include Spartan, the Death Race, Deca, Tough Mudder, and Highlander. In this week's episode, we discuss how to train your brain to stop limiting your potential, what it takes to break people down mentally, and defining what the fire, ready, aim concept means. So please welcome the founder and CEO of the world's leading endurance brand, Spartan, Mr. Joe De Sena.
Mr. Joe De Sena, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
I've been spending hours watching a bunch of your podcasts and your interviews, and I kind of decided that you're definitely a crazy man. I'm sure you've been called that a few times.
I don't know why we have to go there. I mean, that's what my wife says. My kids say I'm crazy, but I would argue that I'm pretty normal and everybody else is crazy.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with you. And you mentioned kids. I've got two. I've got a 9 and a 10-year-old, and I love the story. There was an interview you did where you was talking about someone stopping you walking down a road where your kids were carrying kettlebells, and it kind of got me. The first thing that came into my mind was, right, we've got these long steps along the side of our apartment, and I thought, on a Saturday, I'm going to get my kids holding kettlebells, and we're going to do this, go up and down the stairs. And then I thought, I wonder what the neighbors are going to think. They think I'm probably torturing this guy. So is that something that you've sort of had your kids doing, these sort of unusual type of challenges from sort of, from as young as them being able to walk?
I started them really young. I had seen the movie Kill Bill after my wife and I had our first child, our oldest. And I said, well, isn't it great that Uma Thurman had this Kung Fu master to train her? Could we get a Kung Fu master to live with us? So anyway, I convinced my wife, and we, through a friend, found a Kung Fu master to live in our farm from China. And I've been training the kids. The Kung Fu master trained the kids, and I've been pushing these kids so damn hard. I'm exhausted from all the work over the last, let's call it 13 years of training them. And it's always unorthodox. By the way, with every passing year, it becomes more unorthodox because no one's training anymore. Only 79% of 15 to 24-year-olds, 79% I was just told today could not pass the military fitness test. So I'm doing the right thing. Everybody else is watching Netflix and eating Doritos.
How do you find I've heard you talk about when young kids are kind of like putty or clay. I can't remember the exact term you used, but obviously they're a lot more moldable. Have you found that there becomes an age when it's extremely difficult to get people to change those habits and behaviors to things that are more useful in your experience?
Well, I mean, with my own children, my oldest being 16 now, my youngest being 9, they're definitely pushing back more, but nothing that a glass of water poured on them while they're in bed can't fix. And so, I just have to change my tactics in the mornings. As far as other human beings, all of us, the species, our brains are designed to avoid discomfort. We actually are being told by our brains to not do the work, not expend any extra energy, because it's dangerous to the brain. It's kept us alive on the planet as long as it has. So any age is tough to get people moving, but those formative years are the years where you start to build hopefully good habits or bad habits or no habits. And so the earlier we can get them, the better. That said, if you go off the rails enough and you get heavy enough and you feel, sluggish enough, I've met lots of people in their 20s and 30s that completely do a 180 and they get in the game. So yeah, I mean, I'd rather get them young. I've got a death camp, I call it, on the farm in Vermont, where we take kids every year and just torture them, transform them.
So in terms of suffering, I get what you're saying. You know, it's not natural for us our brains to want to go into that situation. But in your experience, you've had and we'll come on to it in a bit, but you've had a very successful business career and also an amazing athlete. So what part would you say in your experience does suffering play in you being successful at whatever you want from life?
I've been unable to explain this really well. I'll give it a shot with another analogy here, but like, let me say it this way: all of us are going to face tough times. We're all going to suffer, and then we're going to die. Right? It's bad, and then we die. How's that for an exciting, uplifting communication? So if we agree that that's going to happen, that we're all going to face tough times, why wouldn't we practice it? Like, why wouldn't we practice tough? We practice piano, we practice math, we practice English, we practice getting everybody ready for some big event and, rehearsing it all. Why the hell don't we practice hard? If you practice hard, you're going to become more proficient at it, number one. Number two, you're going to create these resilience data points, RDPs, that you could stow away in your brain. And when the going gets tough, you could reach in, remember one of those moments, one of those tough things you push yourself through, and it'll make what you're currently doing easier. But here's the biology behind it. I've done tons of podcasts. I'm very fortunate, like you are, to talk to incredibly smart people. The neuroscientists now can see on the brain when we did hard things and when we complete hard things, it leaves clues, it leaves tracks on the brain. It also leaves clues and tracks when we quit, when we don't finish. You actually see a gap in the brain. So you should do hard things because you got to practice it. You should do hard things because you need some memories of it. But you should do hard things because it changes the biology of your brain. And if you've got a bunch of these tracks laid all over your brain, it's going to be easier to do hard things later.
Have you seen over time, from when you were, I guess, a kid and you were sort of cleaning pools and stuff, to where you are now, have you seen yourself as one, I suppose, become more comfortable with entering those suffering situations? And have you seen an evolution in your own development through kind of these sort of mental workouts where you challenge yourself constantly?
There's no doubt about it that the best endurance athletes are typically older. And I always scratched my head at that. Like, why would they be better at endurance? They might not be better at speed, but they tend to go longer, further. And it's because I think over time we learn it's not going to kill us. We've been through this before, right? We'll get through this again. Yeah, it sucks. My feet hurt. My toenails bleeding. My neck is cramped. But this too shall end, and we'll get to the end of it. And so the more I've done those crazy things, and the more I've gotten to the finish lines, the more I realize it's just, it's just a tough training day is all it is. And as you get older and you start seeing your friends die and your family die, you realize that it's a gift to suffer. It's a gift to do hard things. It's a gift, to feel pain, because the alternative is a lot worse. The alternative is dead.
Do you have any fears now at your stage in life, or is anything that's sort of thrown at you? Like, you've been, from what I understand, from a business perspective, you're an events company, and your whole business pretty much closed down for an undefinable time, and that in itself was probably a massive challenge for you and the responsibility of a lot of people that you had to sort of deal with. But is there anything now at your stage that you feel is still, you're a bit intimidated by it all?
I'm just like everybody else, trying to survive every day. No doubt about it, COVID killed our business, and we're fighting our way out of it. But every day is a challenge. What if I screw up with the kids? What if I'm wrong about all this? What if kids are supposed to sleep in late and eat lollipops? Um, I'm worried about everything, but I don't really let it get to me. I immediately shake it off. I understand that our brains are, wired for 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and so I actually named my brain. Right? You name your brain, and then you have a conversation. Not because I'm mentally ill or anything, but I have a conversation with the brain and say, "Hey, why are we going through that again? We already discussed that this morning. We already resolved that. We resolved that issue already, right? We're not going to get eaten by a shark today. We discussed it. Stop complaining." So that's another tactic you could use, because otherwise you go into these loops where your brain just keeps bringing up the same damn issue over and over and over throughout the day, and it's a waste of energy and a waste of time. You wouldn't let a friend do that, right?
Yeah,
You could do it.
That's a great point, and that's one of the things I was going to talk about, because these sort of thoughts in your head. I'm sure we've all had them, and my guess is you have as well, where you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly this thing hits you, and you go into panic, and it's like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it always seems much worse at about 2:00 in the morning. I've personally tried, particularly through the pandemic, to find ways of not allowing it to get control of me. And I've even listened to people where they've said, look, those are just thoughts and they're not you, and just watch them but observe them, but don't allow them to bring you in. So have you found any coping mechanisms? Because certainly, I suppose, even outside of business, your sort of endurance pursuits, where you've done, I've got it written down here somewhere, but you've done a ridiculous amount sort of competitions back to back, and just going through that must have caused you to question, should I be doing this? Am I injured? Is this right? So how have you had some other coping mechanisms to manage those thoughts in your brain?
A couple of great ones. I have a buddy of mine. I did a podcast with him. You can look it up. His name is Elia. He's a Greek, and I think he's a reincarnation of like some Stoic from way back when, one of the philosophers, because he likes to call me at like 6 a.m, and he's got some new philosophy. But regarding coping mechanisms, one of the ones he came up with, and we were talking about, was the pressure and the fear associated with the event or the day or something like you were just mentioning, is usually associated with your fear of losing everything up to this point. So let's say you were a wrestler, and let's say you've won the last 50 competitions, and now you're about to go on the mat again, and you're sweating and you're nervous as hell. If you could quickly realize that the previous 50 events are not on the line, you've already won those, right? You've earned your stripes there. The only thing on the line is 51. No big deal, win or lose. Right? It doesn't wipe out everything you've done up until this point. So I think that's one great coping mechanism. Another great coping mechanism is you can quit. You can walk off the mat. That is an option. Simone Biles walked off the mat in the middle of the Olympics with the entire world watching. She's dusting off. She's getting back in the game. No matter what you think, whether that was a good idea or a bad idea, it's an option. So like, if just knowing that you have a ripcord that you could pull should give you a little rest and relaxation. You could always quit. And by the way, just telling yourself it's okay to quit usually will get you going and get you through it and get you back in the game. But it's not like, there's a gun pointed at you and you're in a room that you can't escape from. There's a way out. And then thirdly, I like this idea of just, it could be worse. You're up at 2 a.m, like you said, you're sweating bullets. You don't know if this thing is going to happen tomorrow or not going to happen. Oh my God. You're not living in Siberia. You're not in an ice cold shower right now. You're not missing 2 arms and a leg. It's not 1927 in the middle of the Great Depression where it's not that fucking bad ever.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
Yeah, I like the bit that you said where it's like, look, you've got the 50 under your belt and it's all about the 51. But I kind of sense that in a lot of cases we don't typically think that way. Probably because this guy actually mentioned it as an item, and when you think about it that way, it does make you feel a little bit different about those past achievements. But how do you wrestle with that then, in terms of accepting, I've actually won the 50, and by losing this 51, I'm not going to, it's not going to change my life going forward. But I suppose the temptation, whatever you've achieved, whether it's in business or in sport, that it seems instinctively that when you lose, it almost undoes everything that came before that.
Yeah, and I think you really need to be cerebral around that and really study it, because that's a ridiculous way of looking at it, but that's the way we all look at it. That's why we put so much pressure on ourselves. But if you're a business person, you've had an incredible career, there's going to be a moment probably late in the game where something bad happens, because the longer you play the game, the more likely something bad's going to happen. And so you got to rack up those wins. Remember, nobody could take those from you, and just accept the fact that there's going to come a day when you're not as sharp, you're not as good, not as fast, and you're going to lose one. And that's just the way it rolls. Like, that's the price you pay from all the good you did prior to that. So I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's a great coping mechanism.
In terms of failure, how do you train yourself to get used to it, accept it, encourage it, in order, because as you say, those failures for anyone that's successful are going to be inevitable, but it's always, sometimes when it happens, depending on how you define it, but when you're not actually achieving what you want, or you feel that you've failed in some way, how do you prevent that from sort of, being comfortable with it?
Well, let's just say, I just thought of this as you were talking. Let's just say you were a ski jumper, and you're on a freestyle team, and you go, 30 feet in the air, and you do flips and twists and all this stuff. Let's just say that was your sport. That's what you do for a living. Is it realistic to think that every time I go out there and try a new trick, I'm going to land it perfectly? Like, it's impossible. Like, you just have to accept that I got to do this 40 times, 50 times before I nail it, which means I'm going to fail 49 times before I get it right. And it's really just a learning process. So when you think of it in terms of ski jumping, or, you go down the list of, like, is it really possible to think that you're going to come up with a new product or service, raise a bunch of money, start a business, and right out of the gate, it's going to be wildly successful. The whole world's going to buy your product, and you're going to buy a Lamborghini and ride off into the sunset? No, you're going to make about 5,000 mistakes. And then after you've made your final mistake and you finally figured it out, the competitor shows up across the street and steals like half your employees. And then when that's done and you finally hire some new employees, you're going to run out of payroll. And then when that's solved, COVID hits. Like, that's just the deal. A great author, he wrote Gates of Fire. I had him on the podcast, and he said to me, Joe, every day when I write, it's very hard to be a writer. It's a white blank piece of paper, or in the case of, if I'm typing on a computer, it's a white screen. and I'm facing resistance every single day. Failure that I might not be able to put the words on the paper. I can't come up with something. He said, the sooner I realized that that's just the deal, that 365 days a year, for as long as I'm on the planet, I'm going to face resistance. Once I realized that, once I accept it, life became a lot easier. So failure is just part of the process. His name is Stephen Pressfield, by the way.
I'll check that one out. How, when you were growing up, my guess is that you had some sort of pretty influential role models that I suppose got you thinking about things in a different way. Who were those key people in your younger years, and what would you say is some of the sort of impact that they had on who you are today?
Well, number one, and I'm not doing enough with my kids, my parents were wildly different. They started out the same, but then my mom, we grew up in an Italian neighborhood, organized crime. If you saw the movie Goodfellas, I grew up ground zero for that. And so, a typical day was raviolis, cannolis, somebody going to jail, discussing the guy that had the masonry yard up the block and mixing cement. I mean, those were the conversations. Mom finds yoga, meditation, health food in the 70s, which was unheard of. But what that did is it gave me an open mind, like, oh, well, like life is just not about cannolis, raviolis, and jail. Life could also include yoga, meditation, and being a vegan. And so, I got to see all these different parts of life and what's possible, and just having an open mind to religions, to foods, to everything. I don't even remember what the question is anymore. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. But
keep going. It's good.
but it was an amazing childhood because like I said, it gave me 360-degree perspective and openness to other ideas. And like, look, whether you like CNN or Fox or whatever, right? You should still force yourself to listen to the other side once a day, because by listening to the other side, everybody's got, even if you hate CNN or you hate Fox, using those examples, there are probably some valid points on both sides. And the more open you can keep your mind, the happier you'll be. The more you live in an echo chamber and you're very closed-minded, you're going to be more miserable.
I understood that you had some influences which also shaped your life, from probably what wouldn't be classed as a role model that you would recommend anybody following. So, for example, I understand that you sort of had some lessons from the sort of mob that were around at that time. What were, I guess, one of the key business lessons you learned from that side of the fence that was positive, not negative?
Yeah, I mean, other than using lime when you were burying a body, you mean? I'm kidding, of course. The greatest advice I got was my neighbor was the head of a banana organized crime family, and he gave me three things. He said, number one, on time is late. If you have to meet somebody at 8 a.m., make sure you're there at 7:45. That's a simple one. We should all know that. Number two, go above and beyond. Joe, if I'm paying you to clean my swimming pool, you should clean the lawn furniture. You should straighten up the shed, scrub the windows, even though you're not getting paid for that. You need to always go above and beyond in everything you do. And then number three, never ask for money, which was a head scratcher for me, because here I was building a business. How was I going to run a business without asking for money? If you add value, if you do a good job, you'll get paid. That's it. And those three lessons I've carried with me through life, and they really helped me. They've really helped catapult my career.
So you had a very successful pool and business doing garden work, from what I understand, and you went and you got into working on Wall Street, where I understood you were earning quite a lot of money in that particular role. What caused you to leave I guess a very safe, high-paying job where you were, on most people's terms, you were extremely financially successful, and then going into a sort of a very different business, like the event space, which I suppose if you've never done it before, seems like a massive risk to want to take on.
First off, I've done 700 podcasts, either interviewing somebody or they've interviewed me, and no one has ever called me a gardener before. That's awesome. But I'm now Joe the gardener. That's great. I made it to Wall Street. It was a big deal for me, but it didn't feel very purposeful. I didn't feel alive. I almost felt we were making lots of money. There was lots of action. I was at the epicenter of the financial world. But I felt gray, and I didn't want to do it the rest of my life. And I had a picture of a red barn at my desk, and so my plan was to make enough money to get a farm and a family and make it all happen, and that's what I did. And so you got to be careful, right, in life, because you can end up doing the same thing over and over, and before you know it, 50 years later, you scratch your head and say, how the hell did I end up here? Well, you never left, actually, right? You just stayed doing the same thing over and over and over.
When you made that move, was it an easy thing to do? Because I can imagine a lot of people being maybe in similar type of situation where you have a great, well-paid job, your family's taken care of, you may be living sort of in a place and being able to do what most people feel successful, but in your heart, like you said, your heart's not in it. But how did you wrestle with what may seem like an illogical, impulsive thing, which is listening to your heart, and a logical thing such as, look, you've kind of got everything you want, Joe. Your family's good. You've got all the money you want. You're living in a nice place. Blah blah. All the things that go with it. How do you make what could seem irrational and almost have to go for your dreams, knowing that there's going to be a huge amount of risk, uncertainty, and it may be totally wrong?
Well, one thing I committed to at a very early age. Number one, I listen to a lot of people, and I pick up ideas all along the way. And I'm sure when I was young, I remember somebody saying to me they wanted a life where they traveled and they did a bunch of things. And so I probably stowed that away somewhere in my brain. But I wanted life to be fun and exciting. And I didn't want it to be boring. I can't think of a worse existence than just being stuck in one place doing one thing over and over. So yeah, it was scary to leave Wall Street. And yes, you're giving up a lot of money, but I don't want to be bored. I want to go, take on a challenge, an adventure, and constantly be outside my comfort zone and over my skis. And so my family and I have lived, not only was that a big jump to go to the farm and start a new career, but my family and I have lived in 6 different places, like all over. We just go. And right when we get comfortable and everything's going well and the kids are settled in school, it's time to move again. We gotta shake things up. So that's the way I want to live my life. And fortunately, so far, my family has played along. But yeah.
So what came first? Did the Death Race come first or Spartan? Which one of those two did you kick off?
Death Race came first. Crazy race takes place every year in Vermont. Anybody listening, if they want to do the Death Race, they should probably check themselves into a prison for a while for training. And then once you get out, send me an email, joe@spartan.com. I'll get you into the race. You'd have to be a pretty rugged individual to do this, though. And it takes place on the farm in Vermont. And the idea was to emulate life. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong in life. Let's create a race where people aren't spending their time and money to save 4 ounces on a bike seat or buy an $800 wetsuit. Let's focus on becoming human and pushing past boundaries and doing what's seemingly impossible with very little resources. And just when you got it all figured out, you get punched in the face again. And I changed the rules of the race, and it looks like it might go on for another 3 days. And you got to figure out how to hang in there, how to not let the 6 inches between your ears, convince you to quit. And that was Death Race. And then,
so you go on. Sorry,
I was going to say, then years later, we came up with Spartan Race.
So as the architect of the Death Race, which I guess the name says it already, you obviously there to kind of break people and to push them to the limits. And my guess is you must be an expert in what it takes to break people. So what are some of the common things that you can put down or even in life that just absolutely destroys people? What's our vulnerabilities?
Well, this is my wheelhouse. Number one, I don't know if I want to give away all my secrets on how easy it is to break individuals. But just think for a moment, if you're listening to this, think about the things that drive you absolutely nuts, right? When your expectations aren't met. Like if there was a Dunkin' Donuts and they open up at 6 a.m. and you drive there to get your coffee, let's just say they weren't open. Let's just say they weren't serving coffee till 10. Maybe they're only doing green juices today. So when your expectations aren't met, when you've got something dead set, it's been delivered before, you know it exactly the way you like it, and then your world is turned upside down. That's an easy one to break people. Another one, if you're listening and you have a family or friends and you want to break them, just turn the hot water off. People hate cold water. They hate it. It's so easy to break individuals in cold water. It's a very accurate test of checking one's resiliency. Another one is create chaos. If we were being led by a couple of leaders in the military and they started arguing and there was confusion around which way we should go or what hill we should attack, that frustrates the hell out of people when there's just chaos and confusion. Move the finish line. You know, you're running a 26.2 mile marathon and the organizer decided to make this one 28 miles. That drives people batty. Anyway, I can go on and on and on. This is my favorite topic is breaking people.
And when obviously you're aware and you've got your own little laboratory that kind of proves out some of these theories, do you then as an individual, and when you're training people, you've got boot camps and a number of things going on, are you then trying to train people to deal with chaos, deal with when the finish line gets moved, deal with cold, for example? Are those things that you then kind of say, okay, well, look, this is what's going to screw you up. This is what you should be focusing on in life.
Well, funny enough, years later, after Death Race had blossomed and Spartan had blossomed, we started a race called the Agoge, which was the original term used in ancient Sparta to train the young boys that became warriors. It was a 13-year training program, AGOGE. And so we started the Agoge, which travels around the world to train people for exactly that, to train them to be able to deal with those things. Now, I will tell you from firsthand experience, I've been doing this, let's call it 30 plus years. No matter how many times some of those things happen, it's still hard not to break. The human brain will give you the most logical reasons to quit. And it makes perfect sense. And it sounds so eloquent when you're telling your race director or your loved ones why you're quitting at that moment. And sure enough, a week later, you're writing an email that says, I can't believe I quit. I didn't need to quit. I could have definitely done this. So the brain, you got to watch out for that brain.
So in terms, a lot of this is in a physical space. So you're doing events and you're pushing yourself physically. But in terms of some of the things that you're doing in business, is there a close correlation between the things that you would do out on on the Spartan race or a death race and what you would need to do as a leader of a business or an entrepreneur?
It's very similar. Business leaders, business entrepreneurs, business executives should all be doing this stuff. And you may not be able to come to the farm and do it with us in a formal setting, but whether you go out and do a 5K together with your team or come out and do one of the Spartan type events or go join the Ukrainian army, but do something hard together with your team. You're going to build unbreakable bonds. You're going to build those resilience data points, those RDPs we talked about. you're going to become stronger, not just individually, but as a team, as a unit. And look, let's remember, 95% of businesses fail. So businesses need it more than ever, more than individuals, more than families. Businesses need to do rugged stuff together. And like I said, it's very, very similar to what we do at Spartan and Tough Mudder.
Is that the no retreat business boot camp? Is that where you take business people?
Yeah, it's called No Retreat. We've been doing it for 20 years. We're bringing them up to the farm, all kinds of Fortune 100s, you name the big companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Nikes, et cetera. They've all come up to the farm. But now we're changing the name of the show from No Retreat to Joe the Gardener.
I love it. High performers then, are there typical characteristics and habits that these high performers have? You must have come across a lot, like just as you talked about from the business side and then on from an athlete's perspective. But is there anything that you've seen? And is it what people think a high performer would be? Is it difficult in reality? You know, if you imagined a particular person that's kind of jacked and even ahead of a business, is that the typical characteristic of people who end up sort of continuing and not failing and beating everybody else?
We've had lots and lots of jacked 12-pack Marines, Air Force, Army, SEAL, you name it, come out and do the race. The typical, the bodybuilder, the perfect specimen of a human being. They say all the right words. They look the part. They're even wearing the right gear, and they quit. Just like everybody else. And then, you have a mom out there or a monk or a business person who's like skinny and frail, and you're like, no way. And they don't stop. They don't quit. They have something to prove. And I literally could go on for hours with stories like this where they're juxtaposed next to each other, the 6-foot, dude with the 5-foot woman who's missing a leg and has no possible way she's going to beat this guy. And like the guy quits. So it just goes to show you, back to all your questions, like how important the muscle between your ears is to develop. It's so much more important than all the other muscles.
How do you definitely seem like you're an obsessive kind of character, is my guess, and you're a bit of a workaholic from what I see. How have you been able to get that balance? Because you've got 4 children, you've got a wife, and I believe you were doing some of these crazy marathons and stuff whilst your wife was pregnant, so I understand. So, how do you get that balance, and how have you managed to sort of stay married as a bit of a crazy person? Sorry to keep using that term, I'm only kidding.
The crazy gardener. Number one, the only way to stay married to somebody like you have to find a woman that is very forgiving, and somehow she puts up with me. So I can't imagine there'd be many women that would put up with me. I'm a crazy, I want to wake everybody up in the house at 5 a.m. I want dogs and birds living in the house because I just like the insanity. I like the craziness, the life, the activity. It's not boring. And then I don't remember the rest of the question. I'm sorry. I got went to my wife.
So that balance, then you must, over time, you must have had to work on that. Is getting, from what I understand, you've had ADHD, and one of the I suppose side effects is this extreme focus. Is that correct?
Yeah, and now I remember. Yes. I definitely have self-diagnosed myself with ADD. Yes, an attribute of ADD is you do get extreme focus, as well as being extremely all over the place. There's arguments made by authors. There's a great book called The Edison Gene, where he says ADD is a remnant gene left over from hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers would scan their environment. They'd be all over the place, seeming to have ADD, and then boom, a deer shows up out of nowhere, and they are extremely focused on hunting that deer till it's dead. So yes, I think that's the case. And Look, I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration. So I think you're fooling yourself if you think you're going to have a great family life and own a business. I think you're fooling yourself if you think you're going to have a great business and then spend all your time with your family. So like something's got to give. And I grew up around people that integrated it. If they owned a tow truck company, they had their CB radios in the kitchen while mom was cooking. She was on the radios taking call. Like you just integrated into your life. Sounds ridiculous, but if you shut one side down and try to, focus on the other one's going to suffer. So you got to make it work, and you got to find the spouse that buys in.
Staying on the point of focus, I see, and sometimes I have this situation as well, where you can have, particularly in business, there's lots of things to think about and there's lots of opportunities. And my guess, even with your business, as it's grown, there's so many more doors that have opened to you in terms of where you can take the event and business opportunities and that kind of thing. How have you remained, outside of the example that you just gave, and that maybe you've got something in your brain that sort of helped you with that, but how would you advise and coach people to stay focused on the right things so that you can be successful? Because my guess is a lot of your success is having that kind of single focus in terms of where you're going and staying very, very true to that mission and purpose.
Well, number one, you need to lay out your mission and purpose, and it could change throughout life, but at least for the foreseeable future, put it up in big letters, put it in the mirror in your bathroom, put it like, what is that thing you're chasing, that big audacious goal you want to solve? For me, I want to change 100 million lives. And then work backwards from there. What are the things you're doing every single day that are going to help you change 100 million lives? There's a great blog you could all check out called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? You probably know it because it was a UK rowing team that wanted to win gold. It was an 8-man boat. And there was no way. They just weren't fast enough. They just didn't have the resources. It wasn't going to happen. And the coach said, listen, why don't we try something new? Why don't we ask ourselves every day for the next 18 months, with every single decision we make, will it make the boat go faster? Will we get closer to achieving our goals? Hey guys, great day today. Let's go get some ice cream. They ask themselves, will it make the boat go faster? The answer is no. The ice cream's not going to make the boat go faster. Hey guys, great week today. Let's go hang out with the girls. Will hanging out with the girls make the boat go faster? The answer is no. So let's not go hang out with the girls. And they did this for 18 months, and sure enough, they went on to win gold. So you're exactly right. You've got to lay out what the goal is. You've then got to, make sure everything you do gets you closer to the goal. Otherwise, don't do it. And you've got to be extremely disciplined about it.
I've heard you talk about when you've had a vision and you're one of the sort of only ones that may see that vision. And my guess is that's a little bit of a trait of an entrepreneur and a leader, where you're the one that kind of sees things that others don't. What are some of the challenges, if any, that you've had about trying to get other people to see what only you can see? And you may not have had that totally figured out in your mind, but it's like, okay, I can see we need to go over here, and then to enable a group of people to be able to sort of blindly follow you in some respect.
Well, I mistakenly thought that I could just say, hey, listen, I own the company. I founded it. Can you just do this? And I'm continually shocked that doesn't work. Even when I've spent time with very high level military officers, they explain to me it doesn't work that way. The general can't just say, do this, and everybody falls in line. So there's some tricks to it, and I'm figuring it out as I go. I wish I could tell you I had it all figured out, but you've got to help people come to the conclusion themselves. You got to show them how it ties to the bigger mission to change 100 million lives, and you got to ask them questions about, like, what do they think? How would they do it? And then guide them to give you the answer you want them to give you, because if they're not bought in, doesn't matter if you own the company or not, it's not getting done.
Fire, ready, aim. what does that mean, and why it seems a backward way of presenting things. Why is that something that you kind of believe in?
Yeah, I created that because I was thinking one day about like the old muskets, right? We would, you'd sit around, you get ready, you'd load your musket, load your gunpowder, you aim, because it takes a long time to load the gun, and then you fire. And that takes forever, that process. And I thought in this new world where the environment's changing so rapidly and we've got access to these high speed guns and tools, phones, email, you name it, everything is right at our fingertips. I think that saying is outdated. And I'm going to fire, and then I'm going to get ready, and then I'm going to aim, and I'm going to fire again and get ready and aim. And I'm just going to keep doing it until I hit the damn target. Because there's an abundance of ammunition these days. That makes sense? Like, and we're using obviously the analogy of a weapon, but in business, like, guys, we could sit around and talk about it forever. Perfect is the enemy of done, or we could just shoot and let's see what happens. Let's get some market feedback. We just take the plunge and let's see what happens. It's not going to kill us.
Right. Do you think that is, whether it's as a company or as an individual, then that is some way of getting around people procrastinating? I heard you talking about I was listening to a podcast about getting into the cold water. I've got a gym, and there's this bath, a cold water plunge pool there, and your story related to me, because what I do is I press my timer and I commit to myself, and once that timer's on, that I have to get into the pool as quick as that starts, because if not, I'll have to stay in longer. And so the way I get around jumping in the pool, which I also seem to like putting off, is just press the button without even thinking about it, and then I've got to get in super quick, so I don't start walking around the gym and doing all kinds of things to delay it. So do you think that we naturally procrastinate, and we have to find ways of just preventing even having to think? Does that relate to this sort of fire ready aim?
There's no doubt about it. Like I said, the legacy hardware and software of the brain is avoiding anything uncomfortable at all costs, even subconsciously. It'll get you to walk around the gym when you're not supposed to be walking around the gym. It'll get you to drink coffee when you're supposed to be working out. Go down the list. And so, yeah, anything you could do to hold yourself accountable, that's going to get you to do it. And that is exactly why it's fire ready aim. Otherwise, we will sit around and talk about these things forever, but never execute.
So as a extreme athlete, I've found the notes now, and I believe this is correct. You did in 1 year, 50 ultras, 14 Ironmans, and all of that whilst your wife was carrying one of your children. Was that all done in a 12-month period?
Yeah, she was 8 months pregnant, and then when I came across the finish line of I think it was the Switzerland Ironman, she said, "What are we doing here? Are we having babies and growing a family, or are we doing races nonstop?" So yeah, she smacked me around.
What was there must have been something extremely powerful inside you to it is a bit obsessive, I must say. What was it inside you that with what you had in your life, particularly like a wife and children, that made you feel as though that was something that you needed to accomplish? Did you think about it while you was going through these, when you were running? Was that tricky through your head at any point?
I found at a young age that if I had a date on the calendar, it forced me to put down the cookie, go to bed early, wake up early, train. And so the more dates I could have on the calendar, the more training I would do. So I had never been married before. I thought, aren't we all having fun? This is great. And then my wife, who's awesome, right, gave me a wake-up call at the finish line of that event. And she was 8 months pregnant and said, "What are we doing?" Right. So she needed to snap me out of it. Sometimes, whether it's our spouses, our friends, our kids, we assume they get it and they're on board. But it really is helpful when people put their foot down and say, hey, knucklehead, have you noticed? This is not fun for both of us.
I suppose marriage is one of those things, unlike the ski jump analogy you gave, that you probably don't want to do it several times until you perfect it. You know, you kind of want to get it right first time if you can.
Ideally, yes. Ideally, you want to do that once.
So in terms of your fitness goals then, like what now are some of your, you got some interesting stuff on YouTube that I recommend people check out, but what have you found as being a really successful daily fitness habits in terms of movement and workouts and getting up and sleeping and all those kind of things? Have you sort of perfected something that's working now for you and at your age?
I got the ultimate owner's manual for a human being. I wrote this book, Ready for Anything. I think if you Google Ready for Anything Spartan, it should come up as a PDF. I made physical copies. But yeah, I mean, every day sweat, every day take that cold shower, every day don't eat before 9 a.m. Anyway, I don't want to give it all away to you, but I have what I found to be an amazing list of must-dos on a daily basis to achieve maximum performance. And then for fitness, I get into things and then I stick with them for a while. So the last few days, I've been getting into the Airdyne bike and just seeing how many calories I could burn in 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. And so I'm really pushing myself on this Airdyne bike. But there's long periods of time where I get into something for months, for years, and I just do the same thing every single day. I don't recommend that, but I get motivated that way. I go on these streaks.
And in terms of diet, then, is there any things that you found to be successful on that point? I understand that you're not a big meat eater, meat fan. Is that something that you're still doing? And is that more for health reasons or performance reasons?
I just found that you don't need as much. I'm a little disheartened with this whole. And what protein are you having? Protein, 20 grams, 30 grams, 50 grams. There's not a lot of incidences throughout the history of our species where there's been a protein deficiency. There's plenty of protein in plants. Now, if you're going for 22-inch biceps, you're probably not going to be able to do it with celery, but 22-inch biceps should not be the goal. The goal should be, how long do I live? I want to live as long as I can, and I want to be healthy for as much of that time as possible. And so I'm just a believer in more plants, less animal protein, more water. Try to eat within a feeding window each day, and set your alarm clock on when to go to bed, not to wake up. Go to bed early.
Has any of those diet philosophies, has any of those come from a lot of the sort of endurance races that you've done, or would you change your diet when you're on that sort of program significantly?
No, it's from all the races I've done. I perform better on less food.
And what about goal setting then? You at your stage, is that something that has become a habit and discipline? And if so, when and how do you constantly look at what's on the calendar and reset those goals and things that you want for your own future and your families?
I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I'm not looking to prove anything to anyone or even myself. I know what I could do if I put my head down. So for me, my goals are, to get through each day as healthy as possible. Make sure the kids are able to deal with this world on their own, and then make a sustainable business where we can change 100 million lives. So I've got these goals. I don't want to cloud those goals with new goals. That's it, really. I'm sorry to sound boring, but I want to change 100 million lives.
Do you think that it's over time it's better and easier to strip away a lot of that unnecessary distraction? Because I suppose sometimes you can, and I've done it myself, you can end up with a huge list, and it's like, well, where do you start? As opposed to like what your goal and purpose seems to be very clear, as you said, change 100 million lives. And using the boat analogy, is it going to make this boat faster? And that becomes your obsession in terms of what you want to do.
No doubt about it. If you've got way too many goals, you're probably not going to achieve any of them. And I do fall into that trap when we talk about the company. I end up putting too many things on a plate and then wanting them done simultaneously and immediately. Hard to do. So yeah, narrow the focus, narrow the aperture, and start moving forward.
I like the thing that you spoke about in terms of values and the importance of them and having these family values. What have you found has worked to get your family and children to think about those values and to keep it something that stays alive and stays current, and that your kids continue to support and live by?
It's so easy. You have the family crest and values tattooed onto their necks, and it's so easy to stick to them. No, you talk about them as a family. Every chance I get, I say, hey, the De Sena family believes in this. This is what we value. This is what we stand for. The more you could repeat it, the more you can get them saying it. It's just an indoctrination. We're brainwashing them as parents into being good people and following these sets of values. Now, at some point, they'll break away, right, and they'll start working on their own. But hopefully, you spent enough time working with them that they buy into this.
How do you deal with when they don't necessarily want to go along with dad, and it's like, yeah, I'm not getting up and walking with my kettlebells today. I'm going to stay and do so and so. What do you use as I wouldn't say sort of discipline, but what's the leverage that you use to continue with that as long as you can?
Well, we're so fortunate that we live in today's times. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, or anybody trying to get a friend motivated, a family member motivated, there is a thing that everybody has these days that they want more than sex. They want it more than food. They want it more than anything, and it is a device. It's a phone. And so you take this phone away, and oh my God, people will do burpees, they'll climb mountains, they'll fast for 30 days if necessary, anything to get their phone back.
Yeah, that's my one as well. It seems to be on the same page with that one. So look, final question, Joe. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. There's a ton of stuff we spoke about, but what would be one of the most sort of proud and memorable examples of where you've escaped your own personal limits?
I mean, just to give my wife a plug, right? Getting my wife to marry me. That was a big one. I definitely, that was an overachieving moment. Building this business into 45 countries, overachieving moment. Getting this friggin' television show on CNBC. I watched CNBC as a young kid. It's unbelievable that I'll be front and center on this show. Living to 52 years old. I mean, should have died a long time ago. Another overachieving moment.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, thank you very much. I will follow up with you because I wouldn't mind sticking my kids in this sort of children's boot camp that you've got. I think it'd be perfect for them. So I'll have to get the details on that from you.
No problem at all. The problem is everybody wants to do it, and my wife is like, you can't have all these people show up on the farm, all these kids, we don't even know them. And I'm like, remember the family motto, change 100 million lives. We don't do kids camps. You can't do this. But we have it going on this summer. So yeah, reach out.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully get to meet you at some point face to face.
You got it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See ya.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.